I stood on the deck of the luxury yacht, staring out at the horizon. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow across the water, and the gentle hum of the yacht's engines was a soft background to the waves lapping against the hull. I had rented this vessel for the weekend, hoping to give my family an experience they'd never forget. I adjusted my white shirt, tugging it down for the 100th time, though it barely needed fixing. This was my moment to show them I was more than just the old guy in the corner at family gatherings. I had worked my whole life to get here. After years of building my business and saving every penny, I finally had the means to make a grand gesture. A weekend on a luxury yacht. It had cost me, but it was worth it. A small problem had cropped up, though. I had been on the boat for a couple of hours, making sure everything was perfect, when I noticed a minor issue with one of the deck fittings. It wasn't a big deal, but I knew I had to fix it before my family arrived. I leaned over the railing, trying to tighten a bolt when I heard footsteps behind me. "Hey, old man," Derek's voice called out, condescending and all too familiar. "You're really going to make them think you belong here? This whole rich man act is a little much, don't you think?" I froze, my hand tightening around the wrench. It took everything in me to keep calm. Derek was my son-in-law. He never understood what I did or how hard I worked. He looked at me like I was some kind of joke. I could feel my heart rate increase, but I took a deep breath and forced myself to smile. This was the part of the plan, after all. The surprise. The moment to show them they underestimated me. I straightened up, wiping my hands on a rag. "I don't play rich, Derek," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I just wanted to give the family something nice." His eyes narrowed, and he muttered something under his breath, but I was already walking away, heading towards the bow of the yacht, away from him. Let him think what he wanted. This was all part of my plan. As the yacht glided smoothly through the water, I couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. The boat was beautiful, sleek, and elegant. It had cost me a pretty penny, but every inch of it was perfect. A feeling of anticipation bubbled up in me. My family would be here soon. This could be the moment that would fix everything. The awkwardness, the strained conversations. Maybe this weekend would show them how much I cared, how much I had done for them. But as I took one last look at the water, a voice inside me whispered that no matter how nice this all was, it would never be enough for Derek. For Lindsay, my daughter, either. I couldn't stop myself from wondering if this gesture would even make a difference. With a heavy sigh, I turned and headed back inside to prepare for their arrival. The sun had just dipped below the horizon when I saw them coming down the dock. Lindsay, looking more beautiful than I had seen her in years, was walking ahead, her husband Derek trailing behind, looking like he was trying too hard to act nonchalant. My heart warmed a little at the sight of Lindsay. She was my daughter, my only child, and I had always hoped for better for her. Derek, on the other hand, was another story. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, even before he opened his mouth. I plastered a smile on my face as I stepped forward to greet them. "Dad, this is incredible," Lindsay said, her voice light and genuine. She seemed excited, and that made my chest swell with pride. "Thank you, sweetheart. I thought this would be a good way for us all to spend some time together," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, it's impressive," Derek chimed in, his tone far less enthusiastic. He began eyeing the yacht with feigned admiration, his gaze running over the sleek lines of the vessel, the polished deck, and the rich interior. He nodded slowly, but the sarcasm in his voice didn't escape me. "It's seriously, Ron, how did you afford this? You know, with the whole retirement thing and all," Derek continued, as if he were trying to puzzle out how someone like me could pull off something so extravagant. "I mean, it's not exactly your usual style." I bit my tongue, forcing myself to keep my smile in place. "It's rented, Derek, but it's not about the price. It's about making memories." Lindsay looked at Derek, visibly uncomfortable, but she didn't speak. She just gave him a brief, nervous smile before looking back at me. "Dad, you didn't spend all your retirement savings on this, did you?" I felt a sting in my chest, but I kept my expression calm. "No, of course not. Don't worry, Lindsay. I made sure I could afford it without touching my savings. It's rented, but it's a gift, a surprise for all of us." The lie felt bitter on my tongue, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth, that this yacht was one of my proudest accomplishments, bought and paid for in full, and I had wanted to surprise her and Derek with something extraordinary. Sarah and William, my in-laws, were standing by the gangway, eyes wide with admiration. William, my steady, calm father-in-law, was nodding appreciatively. "This is amazing, Ron," he said, stepping forward with a grin. "You really know how to treat the family." Sarah, always the softer one, smiled warmly. "It's truly beautiful," she added, her voice filled with a sincerity that Derek's words lacked. I felt the tension in the air shift slightly as they complimented me. It was what I had hoped for, the respect, the acknowledgement of what I had accomplished. But then, Derek's next words cut through the moment. "Yeah, well, I guess you can only pull this off if you've got the kind of money to spare, right? I mean, who else would rent something like this? Must have taken a lot of budgeting." His tone dripped with disdain, though I could see the glimmer of curiosity in his eyes. He was impressed, but he would never admit it. I tried to keep my temper in check, feeling Lindsay's gaze on me, almost like she was waiting for me to lash out. I could see how uncomfortable she was with Derek's attitude, but there was nothing I could do about it. She was still trying to keep the peace, something she had always done in our relationship. "Well," I said, taking a step toward the yacht, "how about we get aboard and see what it's like? The night is still young." Derek didn't seem convinced, but Lindsay gave him a gentle nudge, and he followed behind her, still scanning the boat with his sarcastic grin. Sarah and William followed, their words of praise now more sincere, as they admired the boat's craftsmanship. But as I led them onto the yacht, I couldn't shake the feeling that Derek's words, his mockery, would haunt the evening. It wasn't the yacht I had hoped to show off anymore, it was the way my family saw me. As we moved deeper into the yacht, the tension between Derek and me was impossible to ignore. His eyes, scanning the sleek wood paneling and gleaming surfaces, betrayed his skepticism. I watched him move around the space, not admiring, but scrutinizing everything as if he was searching for a flaw. His disbelief was evident in his every step. "Must be nice to have all this money just lying around," Derek said, his voice dripping with sarcasm as he ran a finger along the edge of the polished table. "I mean, who needs a yacht? Probably just another toy to fill the void." Lindsay, trying to break the awkward silence, let out a nervous laugh. "Come on, Derek, it's just a boat. It's not like it's the end of the world." But I could see the discomfort in her eyes. She was torn, caught between the man she married and the father she loved. Her gaze flicked between us, unsure of how to steer the conversation away from Derek's constant barrage of jabs. I clenched my jaw, trying to keep the frustration at bay. My mind raced. I had worked hard for everything I had, every penny, but Derek wasn't seeing that. To him, all I was doing was playing at being rich. That was his view of me, a man trying to live in a world he didn't belong in. Derek took a step back and folded his arms across his chest. "You know, I can't even imagine what kind of financial gymnastics you had to do to afford this." He let out a little laugh, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I mean, what's the point of spending all this money for one weekend? Seems kind of reckless." I felt my chest tighten. "It's not about the money, Derek. It's about doing something special, something that can bring the family together." I tried to keep my voice steady, but the words felt hollow. Derek wasn't hearing me, not truly. He wasn't seeing the thought and effort I'd put into all of this, just the price tag. As we made our way below deck, Derek continued to pick apart every detail. He questioned the color scheme of the cushions, the type of wood used for the cabinets, even the quality of the dishes. "These glasses look like they came from the dollar store," Derek remarked, lifting one of the wine glasses with exaggerated care, as though it might shatter in his hands. "You'd think with all the money spent, you'd get something better." Lindsay chuckled nervously, shooting me an apologetic look, but I could tell she was uncomfortable. Her nerves were showing. She didn't want to defend Derek's comments, but she was also hesitant to confront him directly in front of her family. William, noticing the growing tension, leaned toward me as we entered the dining area. He quietly complimented the craftsmanship of the yacht, his voice a stark contrast to Derek's harsh words. "This is really something, Ron. You've done a great job with this. The quality is incredible." I nodded, appreciating William's words, but they didn't fully quell the anger rising within me. I could hear Derek laughing from behind, mocking the place, even as he looked genuinely impressed by its luxury. It was like he couldn't stand the idea that something like this might actually be mine. "Looks like the whole yacht's in pretty good shape," Derek said, though I could tell it wasn't a compliment. "You've got everything polished up real nice. Let's just hope you can afford the upkeep." Lindsay turned to Derek, clearly uncomfortable with his ongoing remarks. She opened her mouth to speak, but I cut her off, trying to keep the peace. "Derek," I said, my tone firm but controlled, "let's just enjoy the night, all right?" But Derek, not satisfied with his earlier digs, continued, his voice dripping with mockery. Yeah, enjoy it while it lasts, I guess. Don't want this boat to sink before the weekend's over. I saw Lindsay's face fall, and I could tell she was hurt by Derek's words, but she didn't speak up. She wouldn't. She never did. I excused myself to prepare some refreshments, needing space to breathe. As I moved toward the kitchen area, I felt my anger bubbling just below the surface. Derek's constant undermining was exhausting, and I was quickly running out of patience. William, noticing the discomfort, quietly leaned toward me once more, his voice barely above a whisper. Don't let him get to you, Ron. He doesn't get it. You're doing great. I nodded, but his words didn't ease the frustration in my chest. Derek wasn't just questioning the yacht. He was questioning everything I had worked for, everything I had achieved, and that, more than anything, was what stung the most. I forced myself to focus on preparing the drinks. It was supposed to be a simple evening, but the tension between Derek and me was starting to spill over, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep it in check. Dinner was served, and I had hoped that the elegant spread I'd arranged would take the edge off the tension. I had handpicked every dish, fresh seafood, delicate salads, and a rich beef tenderloin that practically melted in your mouth. The dining area was softly lit, the perfect setting for a relaxing evening, a far cry from the cold, judgmental atmosphere Derek had brought along with him. But as we sat down to eat, I knew it wasn't going to go as smoothly as I'd hoped. Derek immediately picked up his glass of wine and swirled it with exaggerated care, eyeing the liquid like it was a mystery he was trying to solve. This place is something, Derek said, still not fully hiding the mockery in his tone. I mean, sure, the food looks nice, but come on, Ron. You know how much all this costs, right? Seems like a lot of waste for one meal. Lindsay winced but said nothing. I could feel the weight of her eyes on me, but she wasn't saying anything, perhaps unsure how to stop Derek from making a scene. I forced a smile and took a deep breath. It's a special night, Derek. Just enjoy it. But Derek was just getting started. He picked up his fork, poking at the food without taking a bite. You know, this all looks great, really great. But I have to ask, do you really need this, Ron? I mean, doesn't this feel a little extravagant? Don't be so negative, Derek, William chimed in, trying to ease the growing discomfort. It's just a nice dinner. Ron put a lot of effort into making this night memorable. We should appreciate it. Sarah nodded, her eyes softening as she smiled at me. Everything looks beautiful, Ron. You've really outdone yourself. I gave Sarah a small nod of thanks, but Derek wasn't done yet. He leaned back in his chair, eyeing the surroundings with exaggerated curiosity, as though he was still trying to find something to criticize. Yeah, I'm sure it cost a fortune to book this place for the night, huh? I mean, you've always been one to throw money around, but I just can't wrap my head around spending so much on a weekend. I could feel my jaw clenching. My fingers tightened around my fork, and I forced myself to take another bite of the food in front of me, trying to calm the rising frustration in my chest. Derek had no idea how hard I worked to make all of this happen. To him, it was just a weekend for me to show off. He couldn't see beyond the surface. I glanced at Lindsay, hoping for some support, but she was sitting there, fidgeting nervously with her napkin, clearly not knowing how to diffuse the situation. She opened her mouth a couple of times, but no words came out. I could tell she was torn between the two of us, unsure of how to navigate the escalating tension. Derek's eyes flicked around the room again, scanning the space with barely disguised disdain. You know, if I'm being honest, I just don't get it, he continued. You've been working your whole life, and now you've spent your retirement savings on this? I mean, you could have used that money for something more practical, right? Who needs a yacht? This isn't sustainable, Ron. I felt the sting of his words more than I cared to admit. It wasn't the first time Derek had questioned my choices, but this was different. This was personal. I had planned this weekend to show them all that I wasn't some has-been or a guy living in the past, but Derek saw it as a foolish expense, a reflection of his belief that I was just an old man trying to play rich. Derek, I said quietly, keeping my voice steady. I'm fine. I've earned it. If you don't like it, you don't have to stay. Lindsay shot me an apologetic look, but Derek smirked. Don't worry, I'm staying. I just think it's a little much, that's all. It's like you're trying to impress everyone. I could feel the heat rising in my face. I'm not trying to impress anyone, Derek, I said, my voice lowering, not wanting to cause a scene. I'm trying to do something nice for the family. Derek's expression flickered for a moment, but it quickly turned back to his usual sarcastic grin. "Sure, sure," he muttered, picking at his food again, a mocking laugh escaping his lips. Nice for the family, but probably just an excuse to show off. The conversation, if you could call it that, dragged on, with Derek continuing his barrage of criticisms, each one hitting a little harder than the last. I could see Lindsay shrinking into herself, her discomfort growing by the second. I could feel the weight of her gaze, her silent plea for me to keep calm, but I was struggling. I wanted to make this work. I had spent so much of my time and energy trying to make this weekend special for all of them, for my daughter, but Derek seemed determined to ruin it. As if on cue, Derek stood up from the table, his eyes scanning the rest of the yacht as if he was looking for something to poke fun at. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, he disappeared toward the galley. I couldn't help but watch him as he poked around in the kitchen area, no doubt looking for a reason to criticize something else. When I heard the faint grinding sound, I froze. I knew that sound. It was unmistakable. Derek had found the faucet, and he was twisting it harder than necessary. A sick realization hit me. He was deliberately trying to break it. The faucet gave a faint, sickening snap, and the sound of water rushing out filled the air. Derek's laughter echoed back toward us from the galley as he retreated back to the dining area, a smug look on his face. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what had just happened. Derek had intentionally damaged the yacht. My yacht. The one thing I had worked so hard for. I didn't say anything immediately. Instead, I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm as I made my way over to the galley to assess the damage. Derek's mocking laughter still lingered in the air, but it was no longer a joke. It was a reminder of how far he was willing to go to undermine me. As I stood there, water slowly pooling on the floor, I knew I had to do something. The night was already spiraling, but I wasn't going to let Derek get away with it. Not this time. I couldn't let it go. As the dinner continued, I forced myself to push down the growing resentment in my chest, trying to focus on the food, the conversation. But Derek's presence loomed over me like a storm cloud, his constant criticism eating away at my patience. Every time I looked at him, he was either mocking something or making some offhand comment about how wasteful everything was. The night I had so carefully planned to surprise my family, to show them what I had built and worked for, was slipping away. I was just about to excuse myself to the deck when I heard a faint grinding sound. It wasn't the usual hum of the yacht. It was mechanical, deliberate. I froze, my senses sharpening. The sound came from the galley, the faucet. My stomach twisted. I stood up, trying to remain calm, and walked to the galley. There, in the middle of the kitchen, the faucet was broken. Water had started to spill across the counter, forming little puddles on the floor. The handle was twisted in an unnatural way, almost as if someone had turned it too hard. I didn't need to see anymore. I knew exactly what had happened. Derek. It was him. I had watched him move toward the kitchen earlier, his eyes flicking around like a hawk, looking for something to break, something to ruin. And now, there it was, my worst fear unfolding before my eyes. The damage he had done, subtle but deliberate, was clear. He had broken the faucet. I stood there, for a moment, staring at the mess he'd left behind. My chest tightened. I had hoped for a peaceful evening, a family reunion, but now Derek had crossed the line. This wasn't just mockery anymore. This was sabotage. I forced myself to breathe deeply, keeping my composure in front of the others. There was no way I was going to let him see how much this affected me. Instead, I calmly grabbed a towel and started cleaning up the water. I wouldn't let this ruin everything. Not yet. As I worked, I heard Derek's voice in the background, still mocking the food, still criticizing the yacht. But this time, it was different. This time, his words were just background noise. My focus was on the faucet, the damage, and how I was going to confront him. When I had cleaned up the water, I took a moment to collect myself. I needed to handle this calmly, but there was no ignoring it now. Derek had taken it too far. I quietly moved to the security control room, a space near the yacht's command center where I had installed cameras for safety. There, I checked the footage, rewinding it until I saw Derek's actions in the galley. The video didn't lie. He had done it on purpose. The anger that had been simmering inside me boiled over, but I held it back. I had all the proof I needed now. I couldn't let him get away with this. He was going to know exactly what he had done, and I wasn't going to let his cruel behavior slide. I stood there for a moment, letting the weight of the situation sink in. The yacht, the dinner, everything I had worked so hard to prepare, it was all falling apart because of one man's petty bitterness. I wasn't going to let him destroy this moment, this experience I had planned for Lindsay and the rest of the family. Not without consequences. I silently made my way back to the dining room, preparing to confront him. This was my family, and I would be damned if I let Derek take that away from me, too. This night wasn't about me trying to impress anyone. It was about making a memory. But Derek, in his arrogance, was hell-bent on ruining it all. And now, it was time for him to face the truth. The tension in the air was thick as I stood in front of the monitor, watching the footage. My fingers hovered over the mouse, my heart beating in my chest, a mixture of disbelief and anger swirling inside me. The footage clearly showed Derek in the galley, fiddling with the faucet, twisting it as if he were trying to break it. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he did it without hesitation. My worst fears were confirmed. I felt a lump in my throat as the memory of his mocking words played in my head. The constant jabs at my financial situation, the implications that I couldn't handle my retirement money responsibly, it all made sense now. Derek had been trying to tear me down for some time, and this was his way of showing me just how little respect he had for me. I stared at the screen, watching as Derek moved away from the galley, casually strolling back to the dining area, as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, the faucet had been ruined. I had to remind myself to breathe. With the evidence in front of me, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't let Derek get away with this. This was no longer just about a nice weekend getaway. It was about standing up for myself, for the hard work I had put into this life, for everything I had earned. I made my way out of the control room, still trying to calm the storm brewing inside me. I didn't know how I was going to confront him yet, but I knew I had to do it calmly. I wouldn't let Derek's actions destroy the whole evening, and I certainly wouldn't let him get away with sabotaging my surprise. As I entered the dining room, I saw Derek still lounging at the table, laughing with Lindsay and my in-laws. The smile on his face didn't match the anger bubbling inside me, and I knew it was time to confront him. "Derek," I said, my voice even, betraying none of the fury I felt. He turned toward me, a lazy smirk still on his face. "Yeah, Ron?" His tone was too casual, as if nothing was wrong. "I need to show you something," I said, keeping my voice controlled. "Something you've done." I led him to the galley, where the mess he had caused was still visible. The faucet was damaged, water still dripping slowly onto the counter. Derek's eyes widened as he took in the sight, his smirk faltering for just a second. "What happened here?" he asked, feigning innocence. I stepped closer, my voice low but firm. "You know exactly what happened, Derek. I saw you. On the security footage. You deliberately twisted the faucet, and now it's broken. Do you think I wouldn't notice?" Derek stammered, his bravado crumbling. I didn't mean..." "Don't lie to me," I cut him off, my patience finally snapping. "I saw you do it. You sabotaged my yacht." For a moment, Derek looked like he might try to spin some excuse, but he didn't. Instead, he glanced over at Lindsay, who was standing in the doorway, her face pale with shock. She was already processing the gravity of what was happening, her eyes flickering between me and Derek. "What the hell is going on here?" she asked quietly, her voice trembling with confusion. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "What's going on is that your husband, Derek, thought it would be funny to break something on the boat. A boat that I've worked hard to rent, to show the family a good time, but instead, he decided to ruin it. He's been mocking me all evening, and now this. This is more than just childish behavior. This is sabotage." Lindsay's face twisted, torn between her loyalty to Derek and the undeniable truth of what I was saying. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Derek, his bravado completely gone, tried to backpedal. "Ron, come on, it wasn't like that. I didn't mean to." I took a step forward, my eyes narrowing. "You didn't mean to? Derek, you're trying to damage my property. You think I didn't notice the way you've been mocking everything I've done? This was never about showing off, but you've made it about that. And now you've gone too far." I stood still, letting the silence hang in the air for a long moment. It was only then that I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped it a few times, bringing up the video of Derek twisting the faucet. I turned the screen toward him. "This is you, Derek. I've got it all on tape." His face went pale as he saw the footage. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks, and for the first time that evening, I saw something close to guilt flash across his features. I took another step closer. "You've been treating me like a joke, like I don't belong in this world." "Well, Derek, the joke's on you. This yacht? It wasn't rented, it was bought. I paid for it. In full." The shock on Derek's face was palpable. For the first time that evening, his smug confidence was completely gone. "Wait," he stammered. "You bought this?" "Yes," I said, my voice cold. "I bought it. Everything here, everything you've been mocking, is mine. It was a gift for the family. And now, because of your actions, you've lost the chance to be a part of that gift." Lindsay looked between us, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Derek, what have you done?" Derek's bravado evaporated, and in its place was a sinking realization. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. I took one last look at him, then turned to the rest of the family, my voice steady as I addressed them all. I had planned to give Derek this yacht. It was going to be his. But after this, I can't. He's lost that opportunity. I'm withdrawing the offer. The weight of my words hung in the air. Derek looked like he might argue, but his shoulders slumped. His arrogance, once so overwhelming, was now gone. And for the first time that evening, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. I had stood my ground. The moment the weight of what Derek had done sank in, the atmosphere in the yacht shifted dramatically. There was no denying it now. His actions had crossed a line. The sabotage, the mocking, the endless criticism, it was all too much. And now, the moment of truth had arrived. Derek stood frozen for a few seconds, his face draining of color as the gravity of the situation settled in. Wait a minute," he stammered, trying to backpedal. "This isn't what I—" But there was no escaping what had happened. The reality of his actions, of the damage he had caused, was undeniable. I stood my ground, my voice calm but unwavering. "Derek, you don't get to undo what you've done. You've made your choice, and now I'm making mine." Lindsay's eyes were wide, and I could see the conflict tearing through her. Her loyalty to Derek, her husband, was clear. But I could see the realization dawning on her that Derek's cruelty had driven a wedge between us. She had always tried to keep the peace, to make everyone happy, but now even she couldn't ignore what Derek had done. "Dad, she started, her voice wavering as she looked between Derek and me. But Derek wasn't listening. His arrogant confidence had evaporated, leaving only panic in its wake. "Ron, I didn't mean to—" "No, Derek," I interrupted, cutting him off. "You meant exactly what you did. You've been undermining me all night, questioning my choices, mocking everything I've worked for, and now this—" I gestured toward the faucet. "It's clear what your intentions were." I could see the shock in William's eyes as he glanced from Derek to me. He looked hurt, disappointed, but also like he was just starting to realize the full extent of the tension between Derek and me. Sarah, too, was visibly upset, her face pale as she took in the unfolding scene. But the real devastation was on Lindsay's face. The pain in her eyes as she looked between her husband and her father was almost too much to bear. She loved both of us, but this was something neither of us could come back from. You planned to give me the yacht," Derek finally whispered, his voice barely audible. The realization was hitting him harder than I'd expected, but it was too late. "And I ruined it." "Yes," I said quietly. "You did. The yacht was never a rental, Derek. It was mine. I bought it. It was meant to be a gift for you." The silence in the room was suffocating. Derek's face contorted with disbelief, as if the weight of his actions was just now sinking in. The arrogance that had defined him throughout the evening was gone, replaced by something raw and desperate. Lindsay's breath caught as she looked between us. "Dad, I didn't know," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I didn't know he didn't— I'm so sorry, Dad." "Lindsay," I said, my voice softening despite the turmoil inside me. "I don't blame you, but you need to see what Derek's done. He's not the man you think he is." Derek's eyes darted to Lindsay, a frantic desperation in them. "Lindsay, please! You know I didn't mean for this to happen. I just—" His voice trailed off, but I could see the cracks in his facade. He was unraveling in front of us, and there was no way to put it back together. William, sensing the growing tension, cleared his throat. "Ron, He paused, struggling to find the right words. "This isn't easy, but what Derek did was wrong. We all see that, and I'm sorry. We never intended for this to go this far." Sarah nodded, her voice quiet but filled with remorse. "I know Derek has been difficult, but this is beyond what anyone could have imagined. I'm sorry, Ron." Derek's face reddened in embarrassment, but he didn't say anything. Instead, he looked down at his hands, his face contorted with frustration and regret. He had no excuse, and he knew it. "Derek," I said, my voice steady but firm, "you've lost your chance. This yacht, this gift, it's mine now. You don't get to have it, not after everything you've done." Derek opened his mouth to protest, but no words came. He realized that the damage was too deep. The facade he'd been putting up had crumbled, and there was no getting it back. Lindsay, her face streaked with tears, stepped forward, her hands trembling. "I can't believe this is happening," she whispered, her voice cracking. "How could you, Derek? How could you destroy everything?" I could see her heartbreak in the way she looked at him. Her love for Derek had been so strong, but now it was being shattered in front of her. She turned to me, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Dad, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything, sweetheart," I said, my heart heavy with regret. "This isn't on you. This is Derek's mess, and he's the one who has to deal with the consequences." Derek's head dropped, and he was silent. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, but I refused to show any weakness. His actions had been a betrayal, and there was no coming back from that. Finally, he looked up, his voice broken. I messed up, Ron. I didn't mean to. I didn't think, but it was too late. The damage had been done, and there was no way to fix it. Derek had pushed too far, and in doing so, he had lost everything. Lindsay looked at him one last time, her face filled with disbelief, before she turned to me. "Dad, I don't know if I can forgive him for this. I don't know if I can forgive myself for not seeing it." I nodded, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "It's not about forgiveness right now, Lindsay. It's about doing what's right." The room fell silent again, and I could feel the divide between us growing wider. Derek, defeated, stood there in the middle of it all, and I knew that our family would never be the same. The marina was quieter now, the last of the evening sunlight slipping behind the horizon as I leaned against the railing of the yacht. The soft ripples of the water seemed to mirror the storm still raging inside me. Derek and Lindsay had left, their car disappearing into the distance, and I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I had fought so hard to prove myself to them, to show them that I wasn't just the aging businessman trying to hold on to some version of a life that didn't belong to me. I had poured everything I had into this weekend, hoping it would be a chance to bridge the gap between us, but instead, it had become the day I lost my daughter. She was gone, but not physically. She had left me, emotionally. I could see it now, in the way she had looked at me before she walked away, torn between her loyalty to Derek and the truth she could no longer deny. There was no going back for us, not after what had happened. I shook my head. The yacht, this experience, this gift that I had carefully curated with so much hope. It wasn't about impressing anyone. It was about showing them that I mattered, that I was still capable of doing something meaningful. I wanted them to see that I could still provide, still offer something of value, but the truth was simpler than I realized. I had spent my life giving, always giving, to Lindsay, to my family, to everyone around me. But in the end, it was clear that the respect I sought, the approval I craved, it couldn't be bought. Not with yachts, not with money, not with anything. I had learned that lesson the hard way. William and Sarah were still on board, standing nearby, giving me the space I needed. I could see them both, their faces etched with concern. But I also saw the sorrow in their eyes. They had seen it too. They had witnessed Derek's fall from grace, his arrogance crumbling under the weight of his own mistakes. "I'm sorry for what happened, Ron," William said quietly, his voice low but filled with sincerity. He had always been the steady one, the voice of reason. "I know Derek's behavior was unforgivable." Sarah nodded, her eyes brimming with tears. I don't know how to fix this," she said softly. "He's made such a mess of everything." I turned to them, feeling a pang of gratitude for their kindness, but also a deep sense of exhaustion. "You don't need to fix anything," I said, my voice calm but tired. The truth came out. That's all I needed. "I don't expect you to solve Derek's problems. He has to do that himself." I paused for a moment, letting the weight of everything sink in. The emotional toll of the day, the betrayal, the loss, and the realization that I no longer needed to prove myself to anyone. My relationship with Lindsay was forever changed, but perhaps that was a door that needed to close for me to truly move forward. Sarah stepped closer to me, her hand gently resting on my arm. "I just don't want you to feel alone in this," she said, her voice full of compassion. "You have us, Ron. You always have." I nodded, appreciating her words. I did have them, and for that, I was grateful. I wasn't completely alone. But in some ways, I had to face the fact that I would be moving forward without Lindsay in the way I had hoped. That chapter of my life was over. The sun dipped lower, and the colors of the sky shifted from pinks to deep purples. It felt symbolic, the end of something, but also the start of something new. As the yacht sat quietly in the harbor, I realized something profound. I wasn't defined by the things I had given away. I wasn't defined by Derek's mockery or Lindsay's silence. I was defined by my integrity, by the man I had always been and who I would continue to be. I turned to William and Sarah, giving them a small smile. "Thank you," I said simply, "for everything." The three of us stood there for a few moments longer, the sound of the waves lapping against the yacht's hull soothing in its quiet simplicity. Eventually, I watched William and Sarah walk back to the deck, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I gazed out at the now darkened water, feeling a strange peace settling over me. Derek and Lindsay were gone, but so was the burden I had been carrying for so long. I had tried to win their approval for years, bending myself to fit into a mold that wasn't mine. But now, as I stood there in the fading light, I realized that sometimes the best gift you can give yourself is letting go. As the night deepened, I took one last look at the marina, at the yacht, at everything I had worked so hard for. I wasn't perfect, but I was still here, and for the first time in a long while, I felt whole. I had reclaimed my dignity, and in that, I found the peace I had been seeking all along.